You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. A belated edition of What to Read this month with the first Friday, falling on a stat holiday. No matter, though, as Chris Hall joins us this week with his 5 picks for the month of July. Hey, Chris, great to see you.
Good morning, Simon.
Let me begin by asking, it's the summer in Winnipeg. How's your summer been so far, Chris?
So far, so good. I got to sit out on my balcony the other night. It felt nice. Few and far between experiences like that, but I'll take them when I can get them.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Those leisurely evenings and maybe afternoons or mornings too on a weekend. And I have to say, I've been making use of your past lists to begin the summer months. You know, looking for some authors to read. I've got some Ishiguro behind me and some Ferrante, and fun revisiting those old lists. But for those who have are looking for something new, you've got 5 reads queued up for us. And let's get right into it. A suspenseful and rather menacing sounding title to start us off, Chris. Tell us about this one.
Indeed. It's called Francescas Got a Gun, and it's by Carrie Snyder. And this is a hold on to your hats kind of novel, very fast paced. It's it's told from the perspective of a young girl, Francie. And she's running from someone and something, but it's not very clear what that is at the start. So all we know is she desperately needs to get away from something, and she has a gun in her hand. And as the story moves along, we're moved back in time a little bit, fills in the pieces of the story bit by bit. And I can't tell you too much about the story because it's so reliant on its plot. So, but I can guarantee you'll have to catch your breath in between sections. And something I found interesting about it, there's a real move recently in suspense fiction with the unreliable narrator, and Francie is an interesting twist on that because she's young enough that she doesn't really understand what's happened, and as a reader you kind of feel like you understand better than she does what's going on. So it's kind of an interesting spin on the unreliable narrator.
This is something you've talked about before, and the reason why this is top of mind is because I've got another book behind me, but Viet Thanh Nguyen, another one of those who really embraces the unreliable narrator and that sort of fast-paced action in the reading. Does it read in a similar sort of fashion, really dense and really exciting?
Well, I would say the Nguyen is what's fast paced about it is the ideas and almost like the talking that he does. This one is much more action, physical action. So it's a little different book, but yeah, it's got that same kind of pace for sure.
This sort of a coming of age story. The next one, a different sort of coming of age story on the list. Tell us about this one, a translated title, right?
It is, yes, from the French, from Quebec. It's called Some Maintenance Required. It's by Marie-Renée Lavoie, and she's an author that is on our radar because her first book was called The Autopsy of a Boring Wife, and her second book was called Boring Wife Settles the Score. And so that got a lot of attention and a lot of fans, both among our booksellers as well as our patrons. This new one is a little bit, it's a different story, much different pace than the first book I talked about. It's set in 1993. It's the last year of school for Laurie, and she's our main character. She works part-time in a restaurant, looks after her little neighbor who's named Cindy. Laurie has big dreams. She devours books. She has a budding romance, and she's learning about the world, class differences in particular. But mostly that the world is a lot more complicated than she thought. And she's learning to come to terms with that. How do you deal with circumstances beyond your control? And so life teaches Laurie that we all need some maintenance sometimes. So it's a story really driven by the character of Laurie, a story we can all relate to. It's funny, but it's also serious, wears its wisdom very lightly. And it's a lot like real life. I like these novels once in a while that just take you into somebody's life.
Yeah, well said. These both sound like great summer reads, I have to say. What about the next title?
I like this as a summer read. It's called Joan, a novel of Joan of Arc by Catherine J. Chen. It's a real historical novel in the something to really wrap your hands around in the kind of guys like Hilary Mantel, who happens to offer an endorsement of it on the cover. I only had a vague notion of Joan of Arc's story, and this novel certainly fleshes out a lot of the details for me, but follows Joan from her childhood, where her biggest challenge was to live through and survive the beatings and abuse of her father. And this training, if you will, turns out to produce a woman warrior who arrives just as France is losing all hope against their English foes in the early 1400s. It's fascinating to follow her progress. She's just a normal kid, of course, but she becomes this saint leader who had the ear of the king and whose fame continues to this day. It's really something. But yes, a much heavier and many many versions of that word than the other two.
Yeah, it's putting it mildly, I'm sure. I know you're a big fan of the historical picks. This sounds like a rather thrilling epic. And like you say, I mean, we're familiar with the name Joan of Arc, but we might not know the story. Is this historical fiction, or is it sort of like, how does that work that way?
Yeah, I would call it historical fiction.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not enough of a historian to know if all the details are absolutely correct. A lot of times they capture the the overall effect as much as, and of course they can't know the details of a person's life. So, but at the same time, it offers you an opportunity to learn more about a historical time. So there's a give and take to it.
Totally. A classic whodunit, also on the list this month. Tell us about this this next pick.
Yeah, this one is called Death and the Conjurer. It's by Tom Mead, and this is a mystery novel for fans of the classic mysteries. Agatha Christie would come to mind first. Celebrated psychiatrist named Anselm Reese is discovered dead in his locked study. It was locked from the inside. There's no sign of a murder weapon, very few other clues. And so Joseph Spector, who is a magician turned sleuth, is on the case, and he's of course the perfect detective, since who better to solve the impossible than someone who traffics in illusions. The setting is certainly a big part of the appeal of this story, set in pre-war London with all the dark seediness. Gives it great atmosphere. And it claims, I think it rightly claims it to be a tribute to the classic golden age whodunit, when crime fiction was a battle of wits between writer and reader. I like that, because you often hear readers who, I knew who did it, long before it was ended.
Yeah.
Hear that about movies. So there is a little bit of a competition between writer and reader in these novels.
Yeah, sounds like a good one. And it does sound like it's right out of Agatha Christie's book or something like that. Very much in line with that.
Purposely so, yeah.
Yeah. A different sort of mystery to round out the list. A mystery to me, at least, I should say. Something I've heard about, and something that I think we're all going to be hearing more and more about these days. Chris, enlighten us. The Metaverse. Where do you want to start?
Well, absolutely. The Metaverse and How It Will Revolutionize Everything by Matthew Ball. And you're quite right. I share exactly what you've just said. The term Metaverse is suddenly everywhere, and I don't know what it is. So I picked this book up. I was curious to see. And I have to tell you that after reading the book, I still don't know. But that is part of the point of the book. The Metaverse is a work in progress. And so early players like the who's who of tech companies, Mark Zuckerberg, I'm looking at you, positioning themselves to control and benefit from it. So essentially the Metaverse will be when all of the latest technology, and you name it, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, online gaming and shopping, social media, and everything, virtually everything that exists or will exist in the coming years, when it comes together and we experience all of it kind of seamlessly integrated with each other. The details are being worked out, of course, and part of the determining factor will be us. How users use it, what we want from it, will steer it in the directions it wants. So yeah, if you're curious about what the Metaverse is, you want to invest in it, or you're suspicious of it, or you're in the regulations business and you better get started, this is a good start for you.
But in the meantime, you've joined us on the old-fashioned way via radio, though I should say we're connecting online via Zoom. So look at us. We're slowly inching our way to the Metaverse. And of course, you can keep tabs on McNally Robinson by visiting your website, McNallyRobinson.com, or ours, Classic107.com. We've got all of Chris's picks up for what to read in this month of July. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Very welcome, Simon.